time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod, and another week of Star Wars chat with your host, myself, and your co-host, Blake, and a good friend of ours, returning voice on the podcast, Ben. And we're going to be talking all about Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2, The Mines of Mandalore, as well as the Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 12, The Outpost. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
All right, Blake, welcome back.
Hello there. Hey, good to be back as always. Ready to chat some sweet Star Wars.
That's right. Yeah, another week, another Star Wars episode. Actually, another two
full
episodes.
plate.
Yeah. And we got our good friend Ben joining us this week. Welcome back, Ben.
Hello.
Hello, hello. It's been a little bit since you've been on. I can't remember which. What was the last one? What was the last episode our audience heard you?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, there's some trivia ones. They always kind of be like, "Oh yeah, here it is. I
Can't
see
be as
you."
far back as anime.
I think you're right. I think it may have been like one of the trivia episodes, like it's like maybe around New Year's or something, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, yeah, another week, two episodes to talk about. I think it's just the three of us today. Before we kind of kick things off in Mando, actually, it's a good point. Our YouTube channel's been up and running for a little bit, and I don't know how many of you guys out there have subscribed, but definitely look us up with the handle at SW Escape Podcast on YouTube, and you can subscribe there. You know, like and drop a comment. That always helps the algorithms, and that goes for Spotify and other podcast platforms as well. You can join the Discord. Link is in the description. And thank you to all of you guys tuning in on Podbean, our host platform. It's always great to see people joining in on the host site. So here we go. Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2. All right, Din Djarin visits Peli Motto on Tatooine during the Boonta Eve Festival in search of a new memory chip for an IG-11. She does not have one, but instead sells him R5-D4. Din Djarin, Grogu, and R5 fly to Mandalore, where Din Djarin orders R5 to scout ahead and ensure that the atmosphere is non-toxic. When R5 does not return, Din Djarin ventures out after him and is attacked by several Alamites, a native troll-like species living in the caves. Heading deeper into the mines, Din Djarin is captured by a cyborg creature and sends Grogu for Bo-Katan's help. Bo-Katan rescues Din Djarin, kills the cyborg, and leads Din Djarin to the living waters. Din Djarin begins to recite the creed to restore himself as a Mandalorian. However, a sudden drop causes him to sink deep into the water. Bo-Katan dives in to save him, and on the way back up, she comes face to face with a Mythosaur. Oh, yeah. All right, so initial impressions for this episode. What did you guys think of this one?
I enjoyed it. I mean, it was very ambiance. I kind of like the whole cave dwelling thing, but I got to sidetrack slightly because this is, I got to say, the first thing that really stood out to me above all, like my top thing was was that General Grievous? And then we kind of learned a little, as you get in a little farther, like, no, it wasn't him.
You know, it's
Man,
funny because
I was
like,
questioning it for like half the episode.
it was so funny because like I was trying to think of that cybernetic creature of being maybe a character that we've already known so far, and all I could think about when I thought of a character like that, or maybe even what's that cybernetic Jedi in Force Unleashed, like Kazdan Paratus or something like that. I forget the name.
The guy who's
but
got the robot legs. And
I was like,
saber.
I was like, is this kind of a weird
saber?
twisted version of that character or something? And then all I could do was laugh because like that's all that's left of him is just an eyeball.
Just an eye.
It's like,
That's why I thought it was Grievous.
yeah, I thought like, man, this is super funny. Even if it is like Grievous or something, can you imagine? Like that's what's left. That
dude.
still survived. Like, or
like-
maybe it's Maul.
Oh my gosh.
They bring him back.
You would not
That would actually be really bad.
what I had to do to stay alive,
Just
fueled by my rage.
just the
Or
one.
the
thing.
Mandalorian.
My
show.
singular
For the next
eyeball.
show.
Yeah.
I see you.
I see you.
Dude, the design, like his hands looked like Grievous. He had multiple arms. He moved like Grievous with like the weird, like, kind of like body movements, similar to when Grievous is like running on all 6 legs. And then obviously he was down to just one eye, which is something that's totally plausible for Grievous. And the sound effects, some of the weird noises, like were Grievous noises.
Yeah.
It's like the first noise he made was like Grievous.
I mean, it is Skywalker sound department. I guess maybe they just pulled something out of the library that happened to work. But yeah, and you got a good point there. I'm just kind of like, I don't think it's, I mean, the thing is dead.
No,
so I don't
no,
think
I'm
it's
sure it's
anything to
not.
be thought about. But yeah, it had my brain turning for a second when he popped out of that machine. I was like, oh, like, who's this guy? Like, yeah. What did you think of this guy, Ben?
Of the ILO guy, I mean, I was just looked up Grievous death and I was like, dude, he's like flames coming out of his
Yeah,
eyes. Like,
yeah.
there's no way.
Darth Maul got cut in half and fell down a giant tube.
I,
Like,
I thought he was pretty cool. I think, I was kind of curious. I think it was interesting being like, okay, well, how did this group make machinery if they're just an eyeball? And
I think
how's
that's
he
more
fit
like
in?
all that's left of him.
Yeah. I was like, I was excited to see more of them. I kind of like the idea of like, hey, you have machinery and just replaceable bots. Thought that was pretty cool, that character. As the episode as a whole, you know, sometimes I'm watching, I'm like, man, I think they could have all made better decisions. A lot of
The
times.
characters?
So many times, yeah, I'm like watching this and I was like, okay, actually, one that got, and this might be nitpicking a little bit, is when, okay, so the planet, you know, we have to test the atmosphere, which, by the way, I don't know this whole, hey, we have to go and check the geyser. I don't know why they couldn't just check the surface. I feel like that felt very weird of like, well, is just like 20 meters that way going to be significantly more poisonous than right here? Like, does gas not just kind of move around?
Check that poison cloud, the isolated zone
hey,
over there.
Move over here, and I was like, I don't know if that's how atmospheres work. Another one was, okay, so he's like, hey, Grogu.
I think it was because it was in the cave, though. That's why. Because it's trying to get below ground.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't think, like, I feel like you should be able to detect trace amounts, like, unless there's maybe a mustard gas. I just feel like if it's been there for a while, maybe the gas is very heavy and dormant or something like that. And so I was a little curious on like, okay, weird what we're predicting on. And then, you know, there's a couple moments where I was like, or when Mandalorian was fighting those I forget what they're called, the Planet of the Apes looking guys.
Yeah, the Alamites.
Morlocks.
Yeah, I was like, dude, you could fly and you have a gun. You should be unbeatable against a guy with a club.
Yeah.
He also was worse with his saber than we saw him last.
Is it heavy? Are sabers supposed to be very heavy?
So, okay, so here's the thing, because this has constantly come up, right? Like anytime Din pulls out the Darksaber, I always just kind of cringe at just how bad he is with using it. And in the book of Boba Fett, you know, for those who remember, there was an episode in which he trains with the armorer, and she actually kind of like has something to say in regards to like how he's like wielding the saber itself, and I don't really know if this just has to do with the Darksaber alone or if it has to do with like all lightsabers in general. But she mentioned something about like fighting the blade itself. And I don't know, like, do you guys remember anything in regards to that, or am I just?
I mean, this is their explanation why Jedi is good with sabers and regular people can't use them.
Right. But we've seen regular people use them before.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't make sense.
And
So
that's
it's like,
exactly why it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
because that was the original canon with George Lucas in the original trilogy, and then they changed it for the prequels.
Yeah.
And we see people in Clone Wars use sabers and stuff. I mean, because like I think the Han scene doesn't really count because he just used it as a tool. It's not really fighting anyone. Just putting that out there. Now it seems like they're trying to bring it back, but at the same time we see Katie Sackhoff use it no problem. So in this same episode,
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like Bo-Katan has like wielded it before. So like I had a bit of a moment of rejoice for the fact that at least someone in this series can actually use it like properly, right? Like and like she's wielded it. We know Sabine trained with the weapon as well once upon a time, and so
and I
like
think they came up in Rebels as well. Because Sabine was having a hard time fighting with the saber.
yeah,
She was
it did.
training.
It did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It came up and she's like, it's heavier than I thought, but like it didn't quite look as heavy as Din Djarin makes it out to be.
No,
And I think,
my other question with that
and
is like,
she's 14.
is it your force? Like, is it like a binary? Okay, if you're force sensitive, there's no drawback to using it, or is it like, hey, you're not quite as strong with the force? Is there like a scaling penalty that you have? Like, what is the?
No,
Okay.
it has to do with your connection to the crystal. Then the
Yeah.
crystal aren't working together.
Yeah, but like, I think like, okay, so I assume that your connection with the crystals through the force, right?
yeah,
yeah.
And so my question is like, let's say that someone is like theoretically can be force sensitive. Is it like, okay, if you have no force sensitivity, you're gonna have a very hard time. And if you have at least some, you're in this other, like there's two pools of people. Or is it like, hey, even if you're force sensitive, but you have no training, you're not even aware you're force sensitive and you suck at it, are you closer to a Jedi Master or are you closer to someone who is not force sensitive at all?
I think, I think the best way to answer a question like that is probably just to look at what we know, right? So we do know that the Force is in everybody. Like everyone in the Star Wars galaxy, life would not exist without midichlorians. Midichlorians is your gateway to feeling the Force. Jedi have a larger gateway than most. Having a higher midichlorian count, they're able to wield the Force, unlike other people who don't have that gateway as open as much, right? So even a character like Din Djarin has technically has the Force. Han Solo would be a character that would call it luck. But I would imagine that he's actually a little more open to it than other people are. And that's not to say that like he'll ever be able to lift a rock with his mind, but it's probably kind of in that, it's a spectrum, right? So I think like there's probably some area in there in which Din Djarin is probably at the lower end of the scale, in which he's really struggling to kind of connect with the weapon, right? And really, really struggling to connect with like the kyber crystal that's inside of it. And there's a little clip here from Book of Boba. I'll just play it right now so we can just hear the dialogue that the armor has to say, which might kind of help us like kind of break this moment down here.
Solus. Tad. I. Pure. You are fighting against the blade.
It gets heavier with each move.
That is because you are fighting against the blade. You should be fighting against your opponent. Stand up. Solus. Tad. There. Feel it? You are too weak to fight the Darksaber. It will win if you fight against it. You cannot control it with your strength.
I want to try again.
Persistence without insight will lead to the same outcome. Your body is strong, but your mind is distracted.
I am focused.
The blade says otherwise.
All right, yeah. So, and that's when Paz Vizsla gets in there and wants to take it from him. Does that kind of raise any new questions there, or?
Yeah, I remember that part. I think just seeing him fight with it like this, I was like, okay, first of all, like there's other uses of Darksaber. I guess no one else really had as strong of a problem as he does. Pre-Vizsla is apparently pretty good with it.
Mm-hmm.
Fights Obi-Wan. Everyone else does. Like, it just seems a weirdly odd him-specific problem. And the second one is, then why doesn't he just, again, use his jetpack, fly up? Why instead just say, hey, I want to right now decide to fight with the weapon I'm worst at?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, Blake, do you have any, like, kind of thoughts on that?
It's got to be a plot line. It's the only thing that makes sense because he shouldn't be this bad. So obviously, I'm thinking from the scene we just listened to here, he doesn't improve his training between that scene and where we are now, right, in this episode. I can't think of a time where he probably like wields it, but he probably doesn't do like full combat and he doesn't really improve.
Right.
So I'm guessing that this is going to continue on with some sort of story arc, and he's going to have to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I really think that this, like what the armorer says, because she's no Jedi master, but what she's saying to me kind of resonates with what something what Yoda would say, right? Like, your mind is, powerful it is, right? So she says, like, physically you're wielding it like a normal weapon. Like, you're basically just using brute strength to kind of like actually use this thing. But like in reality, like it's all up here, right? Like it's all in the head. So I think like maybe there's something a little more in line with kind of the magical side of the Force, right? Like that mysteriousness that kind of surrounds a lot of what we don't know, which might stay that way, and I'm okay with that. Like, but I think you're right. I think there's going to be some sort of like conclusion to this story arc for sure.
Maybe we'll go back and Luke will train Grogu and him.
No, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think what is cool is that the Darksaber to me,
Grogu teach him. That's what's gonna happen. I'm calling it here.
It's a very fantasy story, right? Like it's a very fantasy style story in the sense that the Darksaber is a bit like Excalibur. So if anyone's familiar with like the legend of King Arthur, not just anyone can pick out the sword of the stone, right? Like it's very, very heavy for a lot of people. And it's very few people that can actually have the right to kind of wield it, right? And when you do wield it, you essentially have the right to rule a group of people. And that's very in line with the Darksaber.
Anti-Excalibur, because Excalibur can only be wielded by one person. This can only not be wielded by one person.
Yeah, technically, like more people can wield it for sure. But it's certainly one of those things that's like there's some similarities there, right? Like it's a sword in which like it carries a lot.
It is a moral one.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question here. Would Bo-Katan have rightful claim to the Darksaber because alien dude beats Mandalorian in battle? He therefore can have rightful thing. And then she, in rescuing, beats this alien dude.
I wondered that too.
I think it's more. I think it's less.
Who has rights to the Darksaber is hugely important for them.
That's a very like Harry Potter thing. I don't think it goes that deep. I don't think it actually thinks in a way that a magical wand would.
No, but like, because she can't. But Bo-Katan doesn't take the Darksaber when Mandalorian offers it because she has to win in battle. Like, that was
Yeah.
the thing with Moff Gideon.
Yeah, but that's not anything to do with the saber. That has to do with her creed that she's abiding.
Yeah, but by
basically the people-
creed,
her
could
people
she
won't
not
follow
then
her.
take it?
So she's taken it once before, and I think like in Rebels she's taken
gifted
it.
it.
She was gifted it, right? So, but she's kind of, I think what matters to her is because she took it, failed to live up to leading with that saber, lost it to somebody else. She wanted the right to essentially by creed like take it back properly, you know, like because she's accepted it once before, but like wasn't considered, you know, by creed as an ethical way to take it, right? So she wants the ability to defeat the person and actually say like I bested the person that wielded this weapon, right?
Would you not say her killing the alien? No, I just watched this. She killed the alien, or was it Mandalorian who killed the alien?
She killed the alien, yeah.
Okay, but by creed, she should have it. Like,
I guess it depends if the crab creature trapping him counts as full combat. or
Yeah,
not.
I don't. Yeah, I think I wouldn't consider that an honorable duel, and that I think is like the most important thing. It's like I think back a lot to the duel that Pre-Vizsla grants Obi-Wan, you know, because he's got his lightsaber, and he actually throws it to Obi-Wan, and he goes, you know, he's like talking about Duchess Satine in this context, and he goes like, defend her if you will, and then he takes out his own lightsaber and ignites it up. So he actually gives Obi-Wan his weapon to fight him in front of his followers, right? And I think it's a very like Mandalorian traditional, like it's a cultural thing to do, to grant someone like an honorable duel in a way that you might have like a trial by
truly
combat,
bested them.
right? Truly best them, yeah, not like kind of screw them over by tricking them or
cheating,
whatever, right? Or
yeah.
defeating the guy who stabbed that guy in the back or whatever. Right? I think it's more of like you earn the Darksaber by besting the wielder himself of the Darksaber in a one-on-one combat. I think that's how it is.
yeah, I mean, I would say on this one, given that literally she's trying to command the Mandalorians, and she needs a Darksaber, I would say that it's a close enough gray area that I would say they should at least talk about it. Like, hey, you know, some sort of political movement. You suck at using it. You're not very good with it. I would be good with it. I could then bring all the Mandalorians together. And do you notice how I defeated someone who defeated you? Ergo, you know, chain of command. It just seems like it could fit into place so well.
Yeah.
And they're like, nah.
The thing is, I think it also comes down to the other Mandalorians would have to follow her and want to know, like, you know, that it was true, right? And I think that's last season 2 of Mandalorian. I'm pretty sure she has a line somewhere that says she thinks because she didn't earn the saber, that's why Mandalore like fell apart.
Yeah. Well, and like you were just saying, like the followers matter to her a lot, right? Because now at this point, because they don't think she's taking them anywhere really, so they've gone off and done their own thing. So that's why she's kind of sitting there all depressed, like, you know, just like, yeah. And she actually tells Din Djarin, like, go and find them, go and wave that thing around, and they will just follow you wherever you go, right? Like, she's just done, right? So like, even if she did have the chance to take it back, I don't think she cares anymore. I think she's just like, you know what? Who cares? Like, they left me because I didn't honorably get the chance to take this like stupid sword because Din Djarin happened to defend himself against Moff Gideon and best him in combat. So now it's his, and like that chance is no longer mine anymore. Like that's all that matters to them, and that's what mattered to me. And so if it no longer matters to them that I've got it, and they've gone off and now they're mercenaries doing their own business and they've just left me to chill at my castle, like, why should I care, right? So I think she just doesn't care anymore. I think like even if she does, like he doesn't want it. That's the thing. Like, he's offered it to Bo-Katan and she just refused to take it because, like, unless she kills the guy, she's not gonna be able to have it. So I think to her it just doesn't matter enough anymore to really do any impact, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a story here. There's definitely like I don't think we're anywhere close to figuring out exactly, you know, who this sword rightfully belongs to. I think it's an ongoing story or narrative that they're kind of going to be unfolding, I think, as the season goes on. And we still got another 6 episodes to kind of go, so I'm sure this will come up again. So end of season 2, I remember speculating about I forget who was there in the episode, but I remember thinking to myself, maybe even saying it out loud, that it would be so cool if Din Djarin was kind of like the character that is supposed to be the one to rule Mandalore, and like he's the one that's like wielding the Darksaber and stuff. But I think maybe that story narrative is changing in front of us. I think like maybe what we're looking at is a guy who he's a bit like, he's an outlaw, and I think he's gonna kind of stay that way. I don't think he's supposed to be any kind of chosen one. I think what we might be looking at is a narrative for Bo-Katan, in the sense that she is like, redeemed and in her own way. Right. And like
she's technically the heir.
Yeah. And seeing this episode, her witness Mandalorian go into the waters and forcibly just like, because she's so skeptical with all this like kind of hokum, this like ancient like cultural what do you call it, the creed, right? So like she's just kind of like, it's all for theater, right? Like, I've done it, it's all for theater, I was a royal, that's not what we do.
Even if it was true, it was like thousands of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So she looks at Din Djarin's group as like a group of kind of almost a bit of a group of crazies that believe in
cult,
children's stories, and cult. Yeah. So like that's how she perceives them. So when she's kind of like giving them the full tour and kind of reads off the plaque, she's really just kind of it's like, welcome to the museum, right? Like good luck with the ritual. And so but as she watches him do his thing, there's like a look on her face that kind of tells me like maybe she's kind of reconsidering her thoughts on how ridiculous this is.
It just seems amused.
Yeah, she seemed like kind of taken by it. Her personality so far, I would have expected her to kind of roll her eyes, but she didn't. It was a very different kind of look than what I was expecting. So I think you might be onto something, like maybe we're onto a redemption arc with her character, and she's going to be the best of both worlds in the sense of kind of respecting what her sister was doing as rule, but also more in line with like the traditional Mandalorian warrior way. So that would be really cool. I think that would be a great story arc. And maybe they'll rebuild Mandalore on Kalevala or something like that, kind of like how we saw in the Marvel universe, we saw what's the world that he's from? Thor's homeworld. Yeah, what's it? Asgard, thank you. Yeah. It's like watching Asgard blow up, and then they just make new Asgard like on somewhere else, right? Like maybe Kalevala will just be the Mandalore, right? The new Mandalore, and and they're gonna pull the whole narrative of like Mandalore is like a people, not a planet, kind of thing, or whatever. Like they'll do something like that, right? Anyway, that's just some thoughts for the room, but we had a Mythosaur show up in this episode.
Yes, let's get into that.
Yeah.
So this is supposed to be ancient and extinct, and I did not know they were amphibious.
I had no idea that they lived in water either. I was actually quite surprised to see one, seeing as they are supposed to be extinct. But quite frankly, with the whole thing, I all I could think of to myself was like, okay, thousands of years, this thing has supposedly been extinct. How is it that it's like lived on their planet that entire time with like all the technology they had? Because it was a thriving city, right? Like we've seen it in the Clone Wars. The mines were probably active, maybe like at one point, and it just makes me wonder that those underwater caves must go pretty deep. That it was hiding way down there. Anytime they
run deep.
Yeah, because to me, I thought it was weird that they just hadn't found this thing because it's so big. Like, it's like, how have you not known that this thing has been alive down there this whole time? You know what I mean?
Well, there's cases of that on Earth where we thought creatures were extinct, and then they show up like super deep in the ocean. There's like a rockfish or something.
I guess so, but like, I mean, like they have like
that ain't a rockfish.
Yeah, that ain't no rockfish. Yeah, that thing's like the size of a
Nessie? What about Ogopogo?
I mean, like they have technology that can sense life forms, right? Like in Star Wars, they got crazy tech, like. So it just, to me, I was like, it's a little strange that just no one's come across it yet. But
I want to know more. Bo-Katan's gonna ride it like a mountain to war. I want to see Boba Fett on a Rancor and then her on a Mythosaur right next to each other.
I do have to say this though about the Mythosaur. Like, it's a little bit like the Krayt Dragon in the sense where we've had a skeleton of the creature of some kind that's kind of depicted it in a certain manner, and then the expanded universe provided us with imagery of this creature which had very little in common with the skull that we're familiar with. It's a bit like the Krayt Dragon. Like the EU depicted the Krayt Dragon as a literal dragon looking thing without wings, but like it almost looked like a kind of like a dragony thing with like exactly, with like maybe some horns on it or something like that, and more like a lizard, right? But if you look back to the original films, like the Krayt Dragon has always just been like a very snake-like looking skeleton. So it made sense that when we watched Mandalorian season 2, that it was like a giant worm or something, because that's how the skeleton looked. And it's the same goes for the insignia of Mandalore, which is the Mythosaur skull. And I've always thought to myself, what a weird looking skull that is. But like when I looked at the creature on the water, I was like, whoa, like that's it, you know, like that's the skull, that's the face, that's the figure, right? And
they took the time to put the horns in the right spot, instead of on top of the head, just like on the cheeks.
Yeah, and even at the bottom where there's those little like teeth like structures at the bottom, if you look really closely, they're there. And I was blown away. It's very dark. It's very dark underwater, so it's hard to see. But I was so impressed with the design of how they managed to just take that skull, which, you know, to be fair, has never been scaled to size. Like, it's always been an emblem or like a little replica that you can buy or like something like that, right? Like, it's never been like, how big is this thing, right? And the EU imagery has always been somewhat not accurate because they just kind of come up with something and, you know, that's it, right? So like this was super cool for me to like see like the connected dots, you know. It's like this, let's literally take the skull and like make it into a creature. That was awesome. That was super well done. So, you know, props to
I want to see in better light though, see what it actually looks like.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a thing. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe we'll never see it again. Maybe it's just, maybe this is a moment of like character development for Bo-Katan, and you know, maybe we'll never see the Mythosaur again, but maybe that's something that she needed to see to kind of push her in a certain direction, right? Makes me wonder if Din Djarin saw it at all. Maybe he was just unconscious, didn't see it. So
maybe unfortunate.
Yeah. All right. Do you guys have any other notes for this one before we do some rating system?
I didn't know that people referred to Boonta Eve like Christmas Eve. Really? On Boonta Eve?
Oh man!
Like, I thought Boonta Eve was an event.
Boonta Eve. You know, it's funny because the only other time we've heard the Boonta Eve is in the Boonta Eve Classic, which is like the, I guess it's like the name for the pod race, but on
that's what I always thought it was.
Yeah, on Wikipedia though, it says Boonta Eve was an actual like annual holiday and festival celebrated on the desert planet for decades. Yeah, it honors the rise of Boonta Hestilic Shadru, to godhood, and in Mos Eisley it's celebrated with fireworks. That's what it says. So yeah,
that might have been changed since this episode came out.
That's at least the canon explanation. I don't really know of like how, like when that's kind of come up, but yeah, I don't. That's, you know, it's a holiday. It's holidays. Gives depth to a lot of these planets. I mean, I imagine a planet like Tatooine would have holidays. Like Boonta Eve is one of them.
Yeah, I feel like that's a retcon. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was always what George was trying to do. That surprised me as well.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was interesting how quickly Mando gave up on trying to repair IG-88 and just bought some junky astromech instead.
So I have a slight problem with this whole thing, because like I get he's got a droid dilemma going on. Like I get he doesn't trust like any other droid other than maybe like that one because of past circumstances, but it was a little bit of a 180 for him to kind of have that story element in the first episode, only to just kind of like discard it in the second.
No
and just
droids.
Kind of, no droids, right? And he just kind of accepts the R5 unit instead. I just thought it was a bit strange.
No, it was very strange.
Yeah.
He was like, I can only literally have one droid that has a chance of killing me. I'll risk anything. But you know what? This droid obviously doesn't want to come. How can we not get this guy on the piss? Come on. He's cheap.
What a deal.
I will
throw
throw
Eve sail.
free oil bath. I will say this though, like I really did like the fact that R5 with the bad motivator, as we know him to be, translates into a personality of being extremely unmotivated and very like scaredy cat like, you know,
is it
very
the same
like,
one? Is that supposed to be the same R5 or is it?
Yeah. It's the same one. Yeah.
That's funny. It's that cameo passed me by because it was like, oh, R5. It's like Obi-Wan's droid.
Obi-Wan's
wrong R5.
I don't remember owning a droid.
Maybe I'm thinking R4.
Yeah, you're thinking R4. Yeah.
Oops, my bad. So you got that wrong anyway.
Whatever. Obi-Wan's still a liar. He still says, I don't remember owning a droid. It's R4, you dimwit.
These toasters all look the same.
Yeah, Ben, you got any other notes before we give this some Pablo points or poodoos?
No, Ellen had a couple things she wanted me to mention.
Bring
one
it
second.
on.
Ellen, what?
I think he just ran off. Did he just
I think he
jettison out the
did.
escape pod?
I think, did he?
Is he in open space?
No,
look out the window.
Ellen wanted,
there it
wanted to
is.
mention the puppets. She wanted to make note of the puppeteering. She said like it was interesting seeing like things kind of go from, and we were discussing the things we liked and we didn't like about actual puppets versus CGI.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Is this in relation to the first episode and where we had the
even I think just also in relation to the
Babu Frick's family or
yeah, well, like I think just the monsters like and Yoda just like for me it was just like, hey, I'm really noticing puppets.
Yeah. That's it's a good point, because like, you know, Star Wars I guess originally has been kind of known for a lot of puppeteering and stuff like that, and you know, I've got a bit of a hot take about this myself, because like I'm definitely on board with puppets, I think in the right situation. So what the whole scene with Grogu, and like clearly Grogu works as a puppet, right? Like I don't think he would work nearly as well if he wasn't a puppet. But Blake's back.
Yeah, it's like he just absolutely ran and came back.
Yeah. All right, so I just clearly Grogu works as a puppet. Babu Frick, you know, I think he works like as a puppet, right? Like there's some tangibility there. Some characters just don't always work as a puppet, and I think in episode 8 of The Last Jedi, I think I'm still really torn on them using the puppet over what they'd done to replace the puppet in the prequels with a bit
for which character?
For Yoda.
Right.
And I still think The Last Jedi Yoda puppet looks a little funky to me.
All the puppets other than like Empire Strikes Back look a little funky.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
the old Phantom Menace one did too.
Yeah, and that's definitely not saying that, you know, like I'm not comparing that to Jar Jar and saying Jar Jar looks better, but I'm just saying like in general, I think there's a time and a place for puppets, and it's not all the time. But in the times that it works, it should work really well. And I think so far in this series, like they've done a really good job with puppets. We've certainly like made some comments in the past. I know Bryce mentioned the prosthetics on like the Nikto pirate that we saw in the last episode, and wasn't a huge fan of that. I know I've got my issues with the prosthetics that they did for Cad Bane. I think he would have worked better as a CG character for the head replacement instead. But again, like I'm kind of lumping prosthetics in there with animatronics and puppeteering, but yeah, I think there's a time and a
I
place
see
for
where you're
everything.
coming from. I think I get this a lot when I think about what was it when about Lord of the Rings, when people are like, man, see how like all the great animatron, like it's all like you always should be using the prosthetics and things. Look how the orcs look better than the Hobbit, and everyone very conveniently forgets to bother mentioning the fact that Gollum was CGI, and they're like, oh yeah, well, but Gollum was the best, and it's like, well, you see, like it's not that one's always better, and it's like a saving money. It's like, it's different. It's based on other things. Like,
you gotta play to the strengths.
Yeah, it's for sure. I think you definitely have to play to your strengths in a way that allows the effect to come across the best way possible. And puppets, they work, right? Like they've always worked. I think they still work, but there's a time and a place, and it's not every single alien out there. I think there's certainly its uses, but some things just work better in CG. Things like that crocodile, that worked. I think
episode 1 in the season.
Yeah, no, in this episode when they're in the mines of Mandalore, there's those,
the flying crocodile.
There's those
Lizard
alien
things,
so the flying crocodile was
roar.
CG. So the flying crocodile was CG, but it was definitely a puppet when it was sitting in the pipe, right? So like I don't know. I think like maybe and if it wasn't, then props to the creature department, but
props to the prop.
Yeah, props to the prop. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's a great situation in which it kind of works in the best way possible. You've got, and they do the same with Grogu. Like when Grogu's jumping around all over the place, like that's no puppet, right? But when he's being held by a character or kind of like behind something, clearly kind of that's the puppet version. So it's a bit of a juggle with some things, and I think that's kind of the best way to approach it in a lot of situations. But what's the hot take around there, and what does Ellen think about the puppets?
I think we thought that sometimes it worked out pretty well, and sometimes it didn't. Kind of the same thing of like Ellen really likes the Grogu puppet, the way it moves and stuff like that. I wasn't as high on the man. I forgot what's the name of the guys with the club who beat up the Mandalorian.
Yeah, the Alamites. Yeah,
Alamites. Okay, I was like, I forget their name. I was calling them Planet of the Apes looking guys. Yeah. I was like, I wasn't as like high. I think they felt a little bit clunkier for me.
Yeah. So you're also kind of in the same boat with the prosthetics and stuff.
Yeah,
not
like sometimes I was like,
that's a tricky one though, because when you're fighting people, I feel like it oftentimes looks better with costumes, just because the people fighting CG stuff never looks quite right.
I don't know. For me, it feels like like basic 1800 Star Trek Captain Kirk fighting a guy. Like
that was fighting, this episode a little bit. Yeah, I felt.
Yeah, I was like, this fighting felt a little clunkier, especially because, at least for me, it's like, and because they're not like, they don't do as much hand-to-hand combat. It's a lot of guns, a lot of swords, which are a little bit easier there. But I don't know. I think it worked out. It was just, I noticed, like, I just felt like there was a lot more puppets, and I think sometimes people are afraid to not do puppets because the prequels did puppets, and we were scared of that.
I will also say that when you're fighting people in big bulky costumes, it goes a long way in the edit. So a lot of times you can edit it to look a lot more intense and natural. Yeah.
No, I'm kind of with you though on the sense that I think there's certainly a blend that needs to take place sometimes, in which it doesn't. And with these Alamites, I feel like maybe the head could have been done in post, but like maybe the body was left prosthetic. Like that would have been a really good blend of technology there. But
that would also help the actors on stage, because much of the clunkiness is the people in masks on can't see anything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that at the end of the day, it really all comes down to budget. So like at the end of the day, this is a Star Wars show, not a full budget production film, and perhaps it's just not in the cards to have these creatures done with CG heads, right? Like that just might not be be a budget friendly effect to do, and they might just get more use out of the prosthetic thing. Maybe they're thinking, okay, it's going to be dark, we're not going to see very much of them, let's just do the whole costume and kind of call it a day, sort of thing, right? So I mean, it's kind of it's a decision that kind of gets made on a certain level. Sometimes money's very much a deciding factor in a lot of these situations, but there's certainly a happy sweet spot, and sometimes too much prosthetic can certainly be too much, right?
Yeah, I didn't think it was bad. Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, I don't want to drill too much, but just because you commented on it feeling like that Star Trek duel, I felt like where they landed and the planet also added a lot to the Star Trek kind of. Yeah.
I think also
Kirk
just
versus Lizard Man.
Mandalorian being bad at fighting felt a little like Captain Kirk throwing random haymakers. And it wasn't like, I wasn't like, like this was definitely bad. It was just something I noticed a lot. Like, wow, they're using a lot of puppets here.
Yeah. 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 All right. Well, is there any other last minute notes, or should we give this guy some poodoos and points?
Two small ones. I thought when Mando and Grogu were going down into the mines in the first place, coming down through the city, which, by the way, seeing Sundari City all destruction in live action, I thought was super cool.
Very cool.
I'm glad we got to see that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a moment where they're descending, and it just like stops on a platform. It says like 3 words to Grogu, and then just jumps again. I'm like, what? It's like something from like a video game or something.
Like a cutscene. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is this?
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
This is really clunky. This is one of those scenes or moments made me feel like, yeah, this feels like we're in the
volume.
The volume or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what makes Andor such a very different feeling show. Is like there is a sense of scale to the environments because they're not restricted by a dome, right? Whereas like literally with the Mandalorian and other shows like Kenobi and such, like they're restricted to a certain area of physical space before that illusion is kind of broken, right? And so I definitely with these big kind of open worldy environments, you definitely feel it a bit more with the kind of shots that they're pulling off.
Yeah, because like you can always see the grandeur, but it's never close by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they definitely don't have as many aerial shots like sometimes, like or kind of more farther out distance shot. It's always typically a little closer to the actors, and there is something there. There is something there. You just kind of always know, right? But it's a great effect. But yeah, I totally agree.
And one other last thing, because I thought it was great when Grogu was escaping on his pod and his ears are fluttering around. It reminded me a lot of Gizmo from the Goblins movies. Gremlins.
Yeah,
honest, dude, he's so much like Gizmo. Like some of his movements and stuff reminds me a lot. I always like that a lot. Goblins, that's my mistake.
I'm pretty sure the Gremlins are just in Star Wars. That's what they are. Gremlins ancestors.
Okay, actually, my last note: did my man can he not swim? Like, did the beast get him? It was very. I was like, because the beast seemed pretty dormant. I was like, did he just slip? What was the dealio there?
It's just a coincidence. He just slid down the stairs. Real fast.
I have no clue. I mean, if it is the Mythosaur that Mandalore the Ultimate tamed, it is people friendly. So I imagine maybe it was just being a bit playful. But
he was pulled down by another fish. And then we saw the Mythosaur because there's always a bigger fish.
That's right. Yeah, there's always.
You hit the button, right?
Oh yeah. Let's play it.
There's always a bigger fish.
It's so bad.
Those like sea level like voice actors. Oh man. So. Honestly, like I have no idea. Like maybe there's something bigger going on there, but I thought it was a bit strange that somehow he gets pulled down in like super shallow waters and like this thing is like way down there, you know? It's a bit strange. Because he went down fast. Like she jumped in like right away and he was already like at the bottom. So like
He used a jetpack underwater.
yeah, like that was a bit crazy, but all right, let's move. Let's do some points or poodoos. Okay, so Ben, this is our rating system.
Okay, I'm ready.
You can award 3 Pablo points or 3 Pablo poodoos or anything kind of between there. It's a scale of 7. All right, so in the middle, that's a Bendu. 3 out of 3 Pablo points. That's like 100% A plus, the best of the best. 3 Pablo poodoos is the worst of the worst, 0%, F is a fail, right? I think like if you were to give it like 1 Pablo point, which is just north of a Bendu, that's like, you know, that's like a C level, you know, kind of like a good, it's a good thing, it's a pass kind of thing. Bendu is like 50%. Is it starting to kind of make sense?
A little bit. I'm like, okay, I understand. It's basically a scale that goes from negative to positive.
Yeah, exactly.
With the Bendu is being 0?
Correct.
Bendu being
Okay.
50%.
Yeah, okay. Being equivalent to 0 from a -3 to 3 scale. Okay.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. Yeah. So
We also use fractions, so feel free.
if you need to give a 0.5 or whatever, yeah, feel free. I'll kick things off here. I think this episode was a pretty solid, like, maybe like, I want to say 2, but like I think ultimately it was probably more like a 1.5 Pablo points.
Yeah.
Like I liked it a
I think
lot.
the
It
same
was
thing.
great. Did a lot for the lore, you know, but quite frankly, the story wasn't like crazy or anything like that. Like it was, you know, some good character development there, I think for Bo-Katan especially. But you know, I didn't really get a good sense of any kind of crazy moral to the story. I definitely contributed to the lore though, and you know, good Bo-Katan character development, but I don't think it had any big connection with the audience on any deeper level than cool factor and kind of advancing the adventure, so to speak. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead, Ben?
yeah, Ben. Yeah, Ben,
I was gonna say like I was kind of in a similar-ish vibe on like I wasn't like whoa this is good. I would honestly maybe even say like and I think it's also like based on my comparison, right? Like I think coming from watching Andor, I would definitely give this like a 0.5 Pablo Pudu. I just think
Oh wow.
I just think I was like they didn't do a lot to explain some of the things like why like I don't know maybe the poison on the planet got me a little upset. I was like you couldn't just you know do not like could they not just land slightly over there? Like was there no why did he have to go so far? Why do you like could he not just you know go do an air sample, beam it back like they have communication?
True enough. Actually, you know, that being said, that's a great point. We didn't even talk about the air quality thing in this review, but I you know, like even my phone can like tell me what the air quality is outside. Like I feel like his ship you could buy an attachment or something that kind of like just reads the atmosphere. And
I think that's standard.
I
think
feel
all
like
ships do
we've
that.
seen Star Wars stories before in which a ship has told you that information. So I don't really know. Like for the spelunking factor of going into the caves themselves and doing readings at the bottom, but he never did that. So I'm thinking to myself like the whole thing was kind of a waste of time. You know, the whole air.
Maybe there
quality
was
thing.
toxins because everything's eyes were glowing.
Maybe that would be unfortunate.
Mando takes off his helmet and then his eyes are just all green and glowy.
Yeah, exactly.
And like all these people, the entire Mandalorian race, it's poison. We can't go back for our homeland. No one thought to send anything there to check. There's like, nah, dude, it's poison. It's our planet. We're gone though. Like, I was like, hey, what? If
Yeah, no
they-
one came back.
You know, I think you've changed my mind. I think
Tony said it's poison, so it's not worth going to check.
you know. I think you've changed my mind. I think you've lowered my score to 1 Pablo point. And I'm still in the point range, but I think I'm gonna shave off that 0.5.
Yeah, there's
Happy to
there's a
help.
few there's a few interesting quirks, I guess, or
Yeah.
even dare I say plot hole-ish things going on, but they're all kind of minor gripes, I think.
Yeah. Like little things.
'Cause
Yeah.
Like I had my negatives were those. I think my positives were I actually kind of liked the alien with the machinery. I thought I really liked him. He was my
That thing was
highlight of it.
cool.
That was cool.
Yeah,
For sure.
the thing was super cool. I'm not sure if I like that more than the Mythosaur or not. This episode had a lot of really cool reveals, which is what I really liked about it.
Yeah.
Finally seeing Mandalore in person, the planet, seeing it's all like glass. Now we actually know what they're talking about when the Empire, I'm guessing orbital bombardment, or they use some super weapon or something.
Yeah,
I can't remember
the big
just
nuke
yet.
bombs or whatever. The
That's
plasma
what it was.
bombs.
Yeah. Oh, we were talking about the name last episode, weren't we?
Yeah, the fusion rays.
ray.
The fusion
Yeah, that's what it
rays
is.
from the bombs.
There we go.
Yeah.
Neutron bombs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How many other names can we come
Plasma
up with?
bombs.
What's that plasma?
I feel like it was a play. I don't know. Who knows? Whatever. Okay. What's your review for this?
Yeah, so the reveal of that, seeing Sundari City, Sundari City in person, excuse me. Seeing the Mythosaur, the possible General Grievous reveal. All that stuff was very positive to me. I think all that cool reviews and reveals, was super cool. But there's, like I said, there's a lot of awkward minor things. Like, why did we have to go to Tatooine to see that woman for the droid part? Is that the only mechanic he knows in the entire galaxy?
Maybe she
He
was
has to
still
go all
under,
the way to Tatooine every time.
Maybe she was still under contract to show up in an episode or something.
Because, how far is Mandalore from Tatooine?
I don't know, but I'm starting to think that having her as a Lego figure wasn't a waste of time because she keeps popping up. I'm like, if it's just like a small character I don't really care about too much, then whatever. But now I'm like, because I bought his N1 Starfighter, right? And I've got her as a minifigure. And now I'm starting to think okay, maybe she's going to come up again. Maybe she'll become a more prominent figure later.
They keep cameoing her in last season.
Yeah, maybe she'll end up working as a mechanic for the New Republic or something like that. I'm starting to think there's more to this lady.
Well, we'll butt heads on that because I would rather him keep seeing new mechanics that he has to deal with. Not constantly, but I fresh faces now.
I agree.
I
agree.
I really liked when he had to deal with that Mon Calamari mechanic who's just fixes his ship with a bunch of fishing parts.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
So I want more of that instead of just seeing the same person. It just makes the galaxy feel small. That's all.
How many points or poodoos do you give this?
Well, I think with all that together, I'd be sitting around a 1 or just over 1, but I'm going to give it an extra 0.5 because we got the reveal in this episode that the Mandalorian armor can be pressure sealed, and he seals it so he can walk around a planet. And we were talking about that for the last 2 episodes.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah.
Because he's like, I don't want to do it. He's like, fine, I'll pressurize it. So I guess it's normally not pressurized, but he can choose to pressurize it when he wants to.
But it still makes the pressure seal when he puts it on.
Yeah.
So
I guess
it still doesn't make any sense.
No. So I'm guessing what's happened, because we're also talking about if it's pressurized. Last episode of the podcast, we're talking about if it's to be pressurized, it needs to be vacuum sealed.
Yeah.
If it be vacuum sealed, the inside of the helmet needs to attach to the rest of his flight suit.
Right.
But I'm guessing by what we saw in this episode that there must be some sort of ray shieldy sort of thing that's connecting it when he activates it.
It's probably all magnets. It's probably magnetic technology that creates a seal.
Magnetically sealed.
Yeah, I don't know how it's pressurized because the suit he wears underneath, kind of like Boba Fett, it's literally just cotton, it's fabric, it's a flight suit. So unless there's some sort of insulation that we can't see
underneath.
Yeah, some maybe technology that doesn't yet exist, but maybe some sort of spray or like a Gore-Tex, but space ready or something like that on the inside. Maybe I can buy it, but
because the stormtrooper suits, which do pressurize for sure, they have body suits underneath the armor plating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's not just your standard t-shirt fabric under there. All right, cool. We
No,
got
the canon.
so we got so
1.5.
it's 1.5. Okay, so 1.5, one for me, and Ben, what you're rating at 0.5 poodoos, was it?
Yeah, 0.5 Poodoo.
0.5 poodoo. All right, so that's a pretty average rating. Then I would say it's definitely not your all-star episode. Definitely not your worst. Looking forward to seeing what comes up next. And just before we close off Mandalorian and move on to Bad Batch, I will throw it out there to the room. Anyone listening who wants to kind of explore a bit more of Mandalore at this point, now that we've seen Sundari City, gone back there, great place to start is Season 2, Episode 12 of The Clone Wars. It's called The Mandalore Plot. And then follow that up with Season 2, Episode 13, Voyage of Redemption. Voyage of Temptation. And then Season 2, Episode 14, called Duchess of Mandalore. That's a great story arc for exploring Bo-Katan's sister, Satine, and seeing a little bit of Sundari City. Another great episode is called Corruption. That's Season 3, Episode 5. The Academy, Season 3, Episode 6. That's a great episode arc to kind of explore how Mandalore becomes a bit corrupted, like during the Clone Wars, and kind of plants the seeds for later. Season 4, Episode 14, called A Friend in Need, was a great introduction to Bo-Katan. So anyone who wants to explore more of Bo-Katan's story, that's the first time that she takes her first appearance in the Clone Wars, sees how she's connected to Death Watch, and kind of slowly kind of takes her position up as a prominent character in the Clone Wars. And then the Shadow Conspiracy arc, which is Season 5, Episode 14 through 16. That's a super important arc for the Clone Wars. That's when Maul basically, takes together a group of underworld organizations, forms an alliance, and goes after Mandalore as like a prime location for starting a new empire under his own rule. And then, of course, there's the comic book Son of Dathomir, which fills in the gaps of the missing Clone Wars episodes, which will connect that story arc from Season 5 to the last 3 recommended episodes, which is in Season 7, Episodes 9 through 12, which is called The Siege of Mandalore and The End of the Clone Wars, which is the final 4 episodes, and really kind of sees the Clone Wars come to a close, as well as the final battle that Mandalore had to play in the entire Clone Wars show. So those are all really great episodes to kind of go back and explore for stories of Bo-Katan and Mandalore and Satine, her sister, and Pre Vizsla, the original guy who wielded the Darksaber before anyone else did in Star Wars so far, at least the stories that we have, and a lot of other stuff. So definitely go check those out. Ben, thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. It's always great to have you back, and we'll catch you. We'll catch you in the next one, and enjoy catching up on the Bad Batch.
I will.
All right, see you, buddy. All right, let's transition over to the Bad Batch. Oh yeah, you know what? No, we'll take the speeder. All right, Season 2, Episode 12. It's called The Outpost. Crosshair is assigned to Lieutenant Nolan and travels to a remote Imperial outpost on Barton 4 under the command of a clone named Mayday. The outpost is attacked and 2 cargo crates containing classified cargo are stolen. Nolan orders Crosshair and Mayday to recover the cargo. The 2 clones eliminate the thieves and find the cargo, which is Stormtrooper armor, which is TK unit armor. But an avalanche fatally injures Mayday and buries the cargo. Crosshair carries Mayday back to the outpost, but Nolan chastises them for their failure, refuses to provide a medic for Mayday, who succumbs to his injuries on the spot. Fed up with Nolan's arrogance and disrespect of clones, Crosshair kills Nolan on the spot, executing him with his pistol before losing consciousness. Later, he wakes up in an Imperial operating chamber where Emery Carr orders him to cooperate with her if he wants to survive. So what are your initial thoughts on this episode, Blake?
Things are finally getting interesting.
Finally, we're back to the main story, the main reason why we're continuously watching the show every week, hoping that we're getting it back to this story. And here we are.
Yeah, because I've been wondering about
Yeah.
Crosshair since like he first left the group, and he's kind of been completely ignored this season.
We've only had one episode with Crosshair so far, and this is the second. Yeah, so this has been really cool to kind of explore, and I was really, really impressed with the story of this episode. This was super cool, and not to mention the environment was awesome. I love a snowy wasteland, and this was just it was different. You know, it was very
It
different.
was the harshest snow I think we've seen. Like I'd say probably since Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, for sure. It was we had flying kind of vulture like dragon things. We had like very steep rocky structures. It was very kind of like spacey looking in a way, you know, very
People freezing to death on the screen.
Yeah. People literally dying in the cold and very cool environment. And I thought it was so just like, not like typical, but like almost like, you know, like when they kind of just realized what they're basically sacrificing their lives for is just plastic armor parts for the stormtroopers that are coming in to replace them. It was like a moment of like just pure like disheartenment. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, man, you just felt so bad for like
so betrayed.
Yeah, just for those characters. And
it was a really sad episode, honestly. I felt really bad for those clone troopers that were stuck there.
Yeah.
And just
being
ignored. Like they're not even treated as people anymore.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the real thing is like, were they ever, right? Like, were they ever treated as people? Like that's always been an ongoing
just to
debate.
the Jedi. That was it.
Yeah. And here they are kind of just doing what they do. And they're basically just being treated as slaves and you know, it's terrible. Like it's it made a great story. Like it made a super fantastic story. And I think we talk about Andor being full of like breaking points for characters and story arcs, and you know, like really just when have they had enough, right, of the Empire? And I think this was finally the moment. I think we finally hit a breaking point. Like, you know, like his friends were not enough to convince him that this is why they're fighting the Empire, right? And I think it took a lot more. It took Commander Cody, and now it's taken this to really drive it home. Like it took him trekking across a snowy wasteland, barely making it alive, and then watching a clone who he actually kind of respected, a regular clone, who he actually kind of came to respect in his own way, and just kind of dies on the spot and succumbs to his injuries because of someone's arrogance. And I think like that was kind of the last straw. You know what I mean?
It makes sense. I mean, but he already went through this once with the last commander guy who got blamed for Tapoka City, right? And now he's just going through it all over again with this new guy.
Yeah, well, he had that mission with Commander Cody, who he basically just went AWOL at the end of the episode, right? Because
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't want to follow orders, but Crosshair still kind of drilled to follow his orders, so he executes that political leader person, and the Empire takes over that planet, and they kind of up and leave. And Commander Cody has a few last words before he kind of just ditches. I guess that stuck with him. And then, you know, here we are later in the season kind of seeing a very similar event happen where, you know, an Imperial kind of officer of some kind basically kind of screws him over in a way, and someone dies on his watch because of their stupid orders that they give, and he's just sick of it. You know, now he's just done. So he just pulls out the pistol and bam, and now it looks like he's being held in a research facility on Mount Tantus, which is where the Zillibees came from, which is where all the Republic commandos are. It's where the Nala Se is being held captivity. I think that's where the story's heading. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting set up for a big finale, seems like. So the rest of the crew are all going to go there, and I'm guessing they'll all meet up, and they'll realize that Crosshair's, you know, he's changed his perspective on the Empire.
Yeah, maybe he's gonna help them get out of get out of an issue there and kind of rejoin get out of a jam and rejoin their squad or something like that. Who knows? But or maybe he'll even just sacrifice his life and for Omega kind of thing. Maybe he'll. Maybe.
I feel like this show is getting a little darker.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or is it maybe just this episode?
I don't know. I think it was just this episode, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like last week we had the Zillow Beast show up, and I don't know if that was a bit quirky.
Right.
But,
well, the first half was spooky.
Yeah, the first half was spooky. Yeah. So I think the important thing is we're going back to the story that matters, right? And that's really kind of where this show hits home is that story, like that story arc.
Yeah.
I was trying to find a good morale to what this episode like was trying to do. I don't really know if it had one necessarily, but it connected with me a lot. And I feel like it hit home on a lot of ways, like for a larger audience. So this kind of gained a lot of favor of mine, for the episode. I think it's probably one of the best episodes of the Bad Batch show that we've ever seen. So.
Oh wow! Okay, you're going that far.
There was not a.
Do you think it was a lot of that? Really, I feel like would come down to the from the clones' perspective, because I feel like that's what really brings the show out.
Yeah. I think so. It's a great example of like I would put this episode among the greats for like. Up there with all the others that kind of brought that issue like front and center, like whether or not clones are actually people that should matter and have decisions. And, like that's always been like an ongoing thing in Star Wars, right? I think this episode is a great example of like that subject.
And on that same subject, we also got some comments from passerby troopers that they're being forced into retirement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're being forced out, and it really still makes me wonder, like, how Rex and Wolf and Gregor end up in the service of the Empire all those years later in Star Wars Rebels. It kind of makes me wonder how that worked out. But yeah, I mean, I guess what we're trying to what they're trying to say is like this is what's happening. Like they're no longer really caring that much about clones. Like they kind of want them out of their way, and it's like I think it's how Rex puts it, like we file a report to the Empire every now and again, and they just turn the other way. You know what I mean? Like it's
they don't care.
Yeah, they don't care. Like this was a new planet that we had never seen before, Barton 4, so at least as far as my recollection goes. But I thought that was pretty cool. I thought this had character development through the roof. This was a big moment for Crosshair. This was Mayday was a cool character. Yet again, like they pull these, it always baffles me. Just like they're all clones, but somehow they still manage to make new characters with clones. You know what I mean? Like it's like so cool. Like Mayday and his squad, like they had their armor was all kind of like bandaged up and.
At first I was thinking about that because it was a cool design.
Yeah.
At first I thought it was like they were all hurt, and so they had like bandages. But I realized afterwards he was saying how the armor freezes when you're out there.
Yeah.
And like you'll die in your suit because it's so cold. So I think that's actually them trying to add insulation.
Yeah, or some like external layer so that because it makes sense that plastic or in what that material is, which is what's it called, plastoid. It's
plasteel.
It's like
plasteel.
It wouldn't necessarily repel heat. Like to me, it just kind of looks like the kind of material that would just get really cold, right? And it would only be up to the underlayer to kind of protect them from like colder or heat or whatever. So it makes sense that they would kind of bandage that up so that it just kind of makes an additional seal of like. Trying to protect,
to keep the heat in.
Yeah, and then because they got everything going on right up to the helmet, like they got bandaged on their helmets and everything like that too. So I thought it was a really, really cool, kind of like almost like a post-apocalypse look to a clone trooper.
Yeah,
like if it's like very like
it's true.
Scavenger Ray kind of meets Clone Wars sort of thing. Like it was very like
actually it was very Ray-like.
Very
a lot of wraps.
Yeah, not necessarily like wraps for the heat from the sun, but like it was definitely like bundled wraps. Like this is a wrap for like ice cold temperature kind of thing. So it was super cool. I really like seeing all that stuff.
And I thought it was also neat that the raiders would come in and fight them and steal stuff. And one of the things they would do is take the armor off of the dead clones.
Yeah.
So then the troopers that are left are fighting the armor of their brothers, and they all kind of look the same between both sides. Like it's
there's
exactly. Like a mental element to that too, right?
For sure, yeah. Like I think it was short of the helmet. They were pretty much wearing all the other stuff, I think, right?
Yeah, they left the helmets, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Which is why when they were trying to remember all of their comrades, or whatever, they have all the helmets all lined up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That brought me back. That brought me back to the end of the Clone War when they have all the helmets on the pikes. You know, at that last scene with Ahsoka in the winter kind of blizzardy planet that they land on. You know,
501st, yeah. And then Vader finds them all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I didn't have a whole lot of necessarily like things to bring up about this episode, really, other than the fact that I just really enjoyed it. But yeah, did you have anything to bring up before we kind of give this some Pablo points or poodles here?
I think we pretty well covered it. I'm really excited that we're now getting onto the meat and potatoes here and kind of see it all come together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like Crosshair is the most serious character, which is maybe why I like him the most. Because I feel like when you're following the main crew of the Bad Batch, I mean it's a cartoon, but it feels more cartoonish. Yeah. Whereas Crosshair is more serious, and maybe it feels more like the original Clone Wars because of that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a bit less kind of quirkiness going on, and less slapstick humor, like less
comedy thrown in there.
Yeah. Not to hate on Wrecker, but like I feel like anytime Wrecker's around, there's inevitably some sort of like quirky comedy related thing.
Yeah. He loosens the tension a lot.
Yeah. So let's give this some points, and I don't know, I forget if I've even given anything a 3 Pablo points, but I'm just gonna give this a 3 Pablo point. I think this is a great.
Dang.
Yeah. I think this is an ace for storytelling. I think I feel like I've given something between a 2 and a 3 before, and I just think this was like a real standout episode. Like if I were to take any episode of the Bad Batch so far and just kind of present it to someone as just here, this is a good story for like representing what this show is about, or like this is a good animated Star Wars story.
You say that then if they watch it, they'll be let down from the rest of the series.
Well, that's why I'm giving this one the A+. Not necessarily the whole season, but like we're rated per episode. That's why we're doing per episode ratings. But no, I agree. But yeah, like I mean, I think 3 Pablo points. Like it deserves anything close to that. Like this was so good to fit this amount of like emotion and sadness and action and just good storytelling all in a manner of like 25 minutes is great.
No, that is fair.
I thought it was good character development, added to, gave depth to, I mean, we saw a new planet. We got a few kind of lore related things, new scavenger kind of looking crew. Like there was some good design work going on here. We had Mayday show up, a whole new kind of subset of possible like clone army / backstory going on, some remnants of a battalion that just get thrown into this wasteland to do this dirty work. I wonder whose Jedi general that they were falled under. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's a story there too. I feel like there wasn't. I feel like anyone who saw this episode connected with it on some level, and even though it didn't maybe not necessarily have like a good or like a standout kind of like lesson learned moment, I feel like it still had that element that was kind of very standout in Andor as well.
I disagree with that, because I think the lesson maybe it's more of a lesson specifically for Crosshair, so more character development, but he at the beginning of the episode he wasn't willing to bring back a dead body of any like fallen comrades or anything, right? He said they're dead weight. He refers to them.
I would call that good character. I would call that character development. I think that falls under character development, just because like There isn't really a lesson learned there. I think what he's really kind of cluing into is like, don't abandon your friends. I think what he's really cluing into though is like a respect for this person, right? Like we've always thought of Crosshair as like this kind of like lone wolf, kind of like, you know, don't die. Cold. Yeah, and like literally he's like, Mayday kind of says, remind me not to die on your watch, like when he kind of finds out that he would have just kind of left his body there, right? I think in that short time span, Mayday earns Crosshair's respect, and like in a way that kind of works out to him really changing his mind about bringing his body back, right? Like he actually does save him in a way and bring him back. And I think that's what's the breaking point, is like he goes through all this effort to save him and then brings his body back, and then he dies because this fool doesn't get him a medic, you know, like, and it's just like, that is super frustrating. I don't think there's any kind of moral to it, but I think it's incredible character development. I think that's incredible writing, you know, that we kind of have a moment like that. And, you know, this is kind of the result of like kind of what comes out of it. Right. But it, you know, it ticked kind of like 4 out of the 5 boxes for me. And like, I think that was enough. That was enough to kind of give me the impression that I don't want to say this is as good as it gets, but this is definitely a great example of like what a good story is like, you know, within the context of Star Wars, that can be animated, it can be serious, you know, it can be for kids and for adults. All audiences can enjoy a story like this and feel for these characters. And I think like a good story is like when you can really feel these characters, you know, and relate to them.
I agree. Because like even just watching this episode, I was like brutally paying attention and wanted to know what was going to happen, as opposed to some episodes, even this season, where it's like sometimes you're fighting to not look at your phone and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this one just kind of had me absorbed, and I was like, whoa, this is good stuff. Yeah. So 3 Pablo points for me. How many are you getting?
Damn. I'm trying to think of flaws of why I'm not going to do the same, but I'm going to go with a 2, just because 3 to me, I feel like you really have to go above and beyond. To me, like that's, I'd say the only Star Wars content I would feel comfortable giving a 3 is like Empire Strikes Back. So
fair enough.
So I'm going to give it a 2 because, like I said, it really pushed everything in all the ways that a good show needs to, and just really drew you in. And it focused on this. There's some bias here, I will admit, because it focused on the storylines that I like, which is a lot of the clone stuff, a lot of the transition to the Empire stuff, and it was a serious tone, which is not a lot of slapstick nonsense. Like the only scene I would actually consider to be slapstick in the entire episode, not really slapstick, but just a joke, is when, and it was well delivered, because it's during the mine scene when Crosshair stepped on the mine, and then Mayday like is trying to like set it so it doesn't go off when he lifts his foot, and he's still just like, hey, don't move yet. I'm gonna go hide around the corner, like just in case.
Right. Yeah. All right, sweet. So 2 Pablo points from you and 3 from me, and I guess that sums up our thoughts on the Bad Batch. We got one more small thing to bring up before we wrap it up today. So let's get into some news on the podcast.
You can call me Lord Maul. At last we will reveal more news on the podcast.
All right. So, let's bring up the hologram here, because we got some results from the YouTini Book Madness. A whole new set of results. I've been voting. I don't know if anyone else has been voting, but I'm going to drop a link in the description. Basically, if you follow YouTini on Twitter, and I don't know if they're running the same polls on Instagram or wherever else, but Twitter, you can definitely participate. It's always one versus another. They always pit a trilogy of books, or like a set of books, or one book against another book. And it's basically going for like 3 rounds. Whatever one gets the higher votes makes it to the next round, and so on and so forth. So last week, I feel like we made it all the way down. I think it was like almost half the list for kind of like results from this thing. So I'll read through the next set of results, and we can kind of just talk about like what we thought about this. And then next week we got a final 3rd set of results for that first round. before we'll start talking about round 2 in the later weeks. So here's our next set. We'll start off with I think we already talked about Jedi last time. Okay, so Master and Apprentice versus Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad. We had Master and Apprentice win out in that match.
Thank goodness. If that didn't work out that way, I would have been very upset.
Yeah. We had the Queen's, this is the Padme books, the Queen's Trilogy versus Outbound Flight. And Outbound Flight actually took the crown on that one. So
That's Outbound Flight.
Outbound Flight.
That's the new canon.
That's expanded.
There's an old X-Wing series. Oh, it is
That's
expanded.
actually, yeah.
Okay.
So Outbound Flight is the expanded universe novel. The Queen Trilogy is the canon set of books, which is more recently the third one. I think came out last year. So
okay,
yeah. So surprisingly, because those are like some really good books.
Wait,
it's
Outbound
AJ's set of
Flight,
favorite books.
isn't that Zahn?
You know, I actually don't know. Feel free to look it up. It might be. I think it is. I think it is. I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's like prequel era. There's something about Palpatine. I feel like it's prequel era. I think it's like this Chancellor Palpatine sends out a ship of people somewhere, and it had some sort of story that played into a story that came up later in the expanded universe. But is that?
I think this is. Yeah. I think this is the Timothy's on Outbound Flight. This is me going off memory now that I've seen the imagery. Remember that this is on.
Yeah.
I think that's when they first discovered the Chiss race.
Right. Yeah. That sounds familiar.
Because they're just beyond the Outer Rim, and for those who don't know, the Chiss race, that's what a Grand Admiral Thrawn is.
Yeah. No, I'm reading the internal flap summary on Wikipedia, and you're right. Yeah, it does have something to do with the Chiss. Yeah. So the canon kind of version of this is the new Thrawn books that they've been doing. In the prequel-ish era, like it was, I think, Thrawn Alliances, which is kind of like, if anything, similar to this, similar-ish, to the story that was being told in the Outbound Flight. But yeah, anyway, that book won over the Padme trilogy. Next set was the High Republic Light of the Jedi versus the Old Republic Revan, and Light of the Jedi won. We had the Princess and the Scoundrel versus X-Wing Wraith Squadron series, and X-Wing won out. We had Bloodline versus Shadows of the Empire. That's a canon book versus EU book, and Bloodline won.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm very surprised by that.
Yeah. Shadows of the Empire. I think that was the book that introduced Prince Shizor, or had a prominent story with him, at least. I feel like there's a game that's based on the
Shadow.
I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken on that. I forget.
No, that's the Dash Render game you're thinking of.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, is that one called Shadows of the Empire, or am I going crazy?
Shadows is something. Might be Shadows of the Empire. Where's Phil when you need him?
Yeah, exactly. Where's Shadow? Yeah, Phil's probably screaming at us through his headphones right now. All right, so there's probably so here's another set: Thrawn Alliances and Thrawn Treason. So those two books versus Galaxy's Edge, A Crash of Fate, and naturally the Thrawn books won.
Yes, Shadows of the Empire is the name of the game.
Awesome, yeah. So it is based on the same name. Interesting.
And there's a novel of the game.
Oh,
So
or maybe that is
is.
it. Maybe that is it then. Yeah.
Man, Phil's got to be yelling at us so hard right now.
Yeah, he's like, how could you not know? All right. So next round 15 was, match 15 was Dark Disciple, my favorite Star Wars book ever, versus Cloak of Deception, and Dark Disciple did win. There was Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy,
the new series,
the new Thrawn trilogy, in addition to the new Thrawn trilogy. So there's now 6 new Thrawn books in the canon, if anyone needs to know that. So this is the second trilogy of Thrawn books, and that was versus the High Republic Into the Dark, and the new Thrawn trilogy did win. The episode 3 Revenge of the Sith novelization versus Yoda Dark Rendezvous, and the novelization won. Set 18 included Shadow of the Sith versus Dr. Aphra the audiobook, and Shadow of the Sith did win. We had the last two set was the High Republic The Fallen Star versus Darth Maul Shadow Hunter, and the High Republic Fallen Star won. And the final set for this week at least is Catalyst, a Rogue One novel versus Galaxy's Edge Black Spire Outpost, and Catalyst, a Rogue One novel 1. Which, by the way,
good novel, if I remember.
Great book, yeah, written by James Luceno, if I'm not mistaken, who
yes,
also wrote the Darth
Plagueis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he also wrote Darth Plagueis, and Darth Plagueis is coming up. I think it's 1, 2, 3 sets away from being fighting for its life against Allegiance and Choices of One. I have a feeling Darth Plagueis is going to win, but that's a tough matchup because I know that you're a big fan of those stories, Allegiance and Choices of One. Allegiance and Choice of One. That was the ones where they had the stormtroopers go rogue, and Mara Jade, I think, was
that's right.
Introduced to Star Wars. Yeah,
I like that one.
Yeah, so two prominent expanded universe stories there. So there's
that's a prequel for Mara Jade.
A prequel. Oh, okay. All right.
You first meet Mara Jade in the Thrawn trilogy. That's where her and Luke meet.
Got it. So yeah, we're about 2/3 of the way through this first round. This YouTini Book Madness is pretty sweet. I'm gonna be honest. There's we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 more sets for round 1, and then we'll be talking about round 2 results. So yeah, anyone who wants to participate.
Is it 2 weeks then?
This is going on for another like 2 weeks, I imagine. So they post multiple matches per day. So I think there's like maybe 2 or 3 votes per kind of 24, 48 hour period of time. So as long as you can literally, as long as you have an account on Twitter, you can literally just find them. You don't even need to follow YouTini. You can just kind of hit up their profile and just scroll down their profile and just kind of, click your version that you want, click the ones you want to win.
Can you make multiple Twitter accounts and vote more than once?
I imagine so, but that's a bit of a hassle.
Oh, yes. Well, we can't really. If there's a book that wins that I don't like, then I'm gonna say it was probably Russian bots.
So long as you can vote.
The Russian bots really like the High Republic.
I just hope the Russian bots like Dark Disciple, because I'm rooting for that one to be at least in the final set of finals here. I think so. There's 4 rounds and then semifinals and then finals.
Imperial bots. They'd be Imperial bots. Droids.
Twitter probes.
Droids.
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Well, that sums up our YouTini Book Madness. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all we got for the week, if I'm not mistaken. We have another episode, of course, of Bad Batch and Mandalorian coming out on Disney Plus this week on Wednesday. So we're looking forward to chatting about that next week. And we still have a High Republic book review to get through at some point. I think we're going to hit that up sometime kind of after Mandalorian, but before any new Star Wars stuff like Jedi Survivor or anything like that. So that is on the horizon, approaching fast.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And we still, at one point, will review the final novel of the Phase 1 High Republic trilogy.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's been so long I've forgotten the name.
The Fallen Star.
This is gonna be a tough review when everything has already been repressed.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I actually like this book.
All right, cool. That's good. That's good to know. Yeah. All right. Sweet. So looking forward to chatting about all that kind of stuff. And any last minute things you want to bring up before we wrap it up here?
Just waiting to figure out how in the world we're going to watch Star Wars Celebration.
Oh, yeah, that's great news to bring up is they sent out an update. We will get Celebration live, but...
Quick, hit the Celebration button.
Let's do applause.
That's good. That'll work.
All right, Yeah, we
Like,
will.
what the heck were they thinking?
After all, we will get Celebration live, so that's super awesome because we were super worried that we wouldn't get to watch this online. But at least it'll be similar to last year. We won't get access to all the panels, but I think you and I are gonna be able to figure something out. We'll be doing our daily Celebration sit downs and catch ups, and kind of have just an open kind of recording channel for anyone to kind of pop in and give their thoughts. And I think that'll be really fun.
Yeah, it'd be a good time.
Yeah.
So, save the date.
Save the dates, yeah. Celebration weekend. All right, we'll catch you in the next episode. In the next episode. We'll see you later, my friend.
See you out there. Keep flying.
All right, thank you so much for all of you guys tuning in. You can find us on our social handles at SW Escape Podcast, and our email is swescapepodcast@gmail.com. You can find it all in the description below, along with a link to our Discord server, which you can join and join the Star Wars forums. Subscribe to the YouTube, leave us a review, 5 stars, hit that like button, and may the Force be with you. We'll see you in the next episode of Star Wars Escape Pod.